Welcome, and congratulations! You're about to join in the excitement and fun of learning to decorate. The creative people at Wilton have set the standard by devoting over 50 years to perfecting decorating ideas. They design new products and produce publications just to make it easy to bake and decorate all kinds of delicious cakes, candies, and cookies. In this series, you'll benefit from techniques that are taught at the famous Wilton School and in many department and specialty stores throughout the country. We'll also introduce you to our newest pans, specialty items, tools, and accessories that make it easier than ever to create all types of unique cakes. Now, no matter what the occasion, from birthdays to holidays, weddings, anniversaries, showers, or special parties, your Wilton decorating skills will add a personal touch. For all your celebrations, you can make cakes that are beautiful, whimsical, colorful, elegant, or cute, in every imaginable shape. We're delighted to offer this series of Wilton programs on decorating that you may refer to time and again at your own pace. You'll love all the compliments that come from family and friends. Let's get started by joining Zella Junkin, director of the Wilton School of Cake Decorating. Zella is ready to demonstrate the steps of making tiered cakes, from construction to those fabulous finishing touches in this program, How to Make Wedding Cakes.
All of us are accustomed to seeing beautiful wedding cakes serve as a centerpiece for a wedding reception. But really, the tradition of serving wedding cakes goes back hundreds of years, to the time when the Greeks served honey-sweetened cakes for their brides and grooms. I think my favorite story, though perhaps it won't be the bride's favorite story, is that during medieval times, they didn't have shortening to make any cakes actually tender. They took the cake and broke it over the bride's head. Then the guests picked up the pieces and threw it at the bride and groom for good luck, much like we throw rice today. Well, certainly we've come a long way since the time we broke cakes over the bride's heads, and today we expect our cakes to taste good and to look beautiful too. During this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make all 4 of these cakes, and they're really a combination of 3 different construction methods. So we'll be doing those 3 methods. I'll also be going over some special decorating techniques that look good on wedding cakes, such as the sweet peas, the swags, and the ribbons. I think you'll find when you start decorating that all of these things can be combined to customize a cake for one particular bride. You can change shapes of, or really change sizes of layers. You can change colors of flowers, and you'll have a cake that's suited for that one particular bride. A couple other things just to keep in mind about wedding cakes is that all of the layers are always supported by something other than the cake. If you have a layer that doesn't have separator sets in between it, we have dowel rods in these. Then the others have separator sets and pillars and posts between. So cakes are never just setting on each other. And the other thing I think that's going to make it fun for you to make wedding cakes is advanced planning. Because you're making 4 or 5 cakes at the same time, you're going to want to be sure and plan way ahead for the type of equipment that you're going to need. More than any other type of decorating, I think you're going to want to have special equipment and have it on hand when you need it. Most of you probably are already cake decorators and have done a few cakes, so you may have bags and tips. But I think you're going to want a few more because you'll be using several colors at one time. You can have parchment cones. These are disposable bags which come in real handy when you need a lot of extra icing colors because you can just throw them away when you're through using them. These are the Wilton featherweight bags, which last for a long time, and they're a polyester coated bag. In addition to the bags, you probably want some extra tips. These are just some larger tips that make large ribbon borders. One tip that even makes a ribbon swag and a star border at the same time. Then a cake icer tip. This is so it makes it easy to ice large layers. We have flower formers. When you make your icing flowers ahead of time, you can put them in the formers and it gives them kind of a lifelike shape. Of course, I think one of the things that brides love to pick out, and that's the topper for their wedding cake. So you'll want a selection of toppers. If you're making cake at home, or you'll want to have a way for your bride to be able to pick out one. Turntables are necessary, particularly for icing the larger layers. And then in the icing, because we use colors on wedding cakes, I think you'll want a selection of paste colors. In your own kitchen, you want to be sure and have scissors, clippers. These are for clipping the dowel rods, a selection of spatulas. Then some things that make actually working on a large cake much easier because most wedding cakes are very symmetrical. The marking of them is really important. And this is a cake dividing wheel. You're able to put a cake on here and then divide it in however many sections you want. And I'll be covering this a little bit later on just how to use it. The separator plates come in all different types, from round to clear to heart shape. One of the questions that we often get is how many separator plates people actually need. And as a rule, you are going to be using 2 of the same size when you're doing a cake because they go at the top and the bottom of your pillars. And of course, the pillars, again, come in different sizes, different shapes, and different heights. You'll want those. These are the dowel rods, and those are what we're going to use to support the cake. In between, we'll be clipping these. Pattern presses come in all different shapes. We have one of the cakes that have hearts on it, and you just use a pattern press instead of trying to draw the heart on it. Fancy foil for covering a base for your wedding cake if you don't have a platter that fits your bottom tier. This is tuck and ruffle, just a pretty added trim for the bottom of wedding cakes. I think one thing, particularly when you start handling a number of tiers and larger tiers, that you want to have a selection of, and that's the cake boards. And these come from very large rounds to the smaller, not only to ice the cake on, but to serve kind of as a handy spatula for removing layers and for flipping them out of the pans. Then one thing I think that you're going to find really that you can depend on when you start baking wedding cakes or large tier cakes are the right type of pans. We often get asked questions about how to get a high straight side on a cake, and just remember that a cake pan is really like a mold. So what you put in comes out the same way, and that's why it's important to look for a pan that has high straight sides. A lot of the pans come 2-inch high sides, and then we also have 3-inch high sides. And a lot of people, particularly if you're using a pound cake or even a carrot cake, which is very popular now for weddings, you'll want the high 3-inch high side pans. Another pan, this is a half round pan. It makes an 18-inch cake, of course, if you bake 2 of them. Nowadays, a lot of ovens, you can't get an 18-inch round pan in the oven. So with this, you're able to make a real large bottom tier. Before we really get into decorating the cakes, in the next section, I'm going to be giving you several hints on how you can handle those large layers of cakes. Before you start actually constructing and decorating your wedding cake, you want to be sure that your cake layers are level. Before we level the cake, I want to go over just a couple hints on baking in the large layers. Remember that you want to be sure and grease and flour a cake pan or put parchment in it. If you're going to use grease and flour, it should be a pure vegetable shortening. After it comes out of the oven, you want to cool it on a rack, and this is important because the air should get underneath the pan. Otherwise, it's going to get sticky and moist on the bottom. It should cool about 10 minutes, or in the large layers, 15 minutes. Then, if you're sure that you've cooled the cake for the right amount of time, then all you have to do is flip it out. Now, the thing to remember when you're handling the large layers is that you always need something the same size or larger than the cake to flip it out on, and you're always going to have 2 surfaces. I'm going to put the cake actually back in the pan because I want to talk to you a little bit about leveling it. You either, after you've cooled your cake, you can either flip it out and actually level it out of the pan or in the pan, and use a serrated knife if you'd like. I like actually the bottom layer. I like leveling in the pan because you always want the bottom layer. You want a full 4-inch high layer on the bottom of your cake. And so if you level this in a 2-inch pan, you're going to be sure that you have 2 2-inch layers. The top layer, maybe the 6-inch layer you may have on the top, you probably will only want 3 inches high, so maybe you'll level that out of the pan. Then this is how the cake boards really come in handy. You can use these just like a large spatula to actually remove the top of your cake. And then, of course, you can flip it out again on another cake circle. So you can see that as long as you have two things to use with each cake. You're never going to be in danger of cracking or breaking that cake. After it's flipped out on the board, you're going to be turning it back again so that you always have the bottom part resting on the board. So you're going to have the cut part to the top. Then I'd like to show you, I have a cake ready. This is a 10-inch round that's been just crumb coated. Now, I'm not really such a bad decorator that I left all these crumbs in, but I think you're going to find, particularly when you're doing wedding cakes, is that most people like to get as much done in time as possible. And you can do a crumb coat of the wedding cake. If you want to freeze them, you can do them up to a month ahead of time, or if you're going to just keep them out at room temperature at least a day. I want to show you how to use the cake icer tip, and this is a tip that we can just actually lay down a bead of icing around the cake. I have it in a 16-inch bag, and this has a thin buttercream icing. I have the 10-inch cake on a same-size cake circle. We have this on a 10-inch board. And to use the cake icer tip, you just rest it lightly on the surface, and then as you squeeze, you're going to just lay a bead of icing out on the cake. I am putting this on the crumb-coated cake, and the reason you crumb coat a cake is this is just a light layer of buttercream, thin buttercream icing that you put on ahead of time and smooth out. And this way, when it dries, then your crumbs dry in this coat, and you can put another layer of icing on, and then you're sure that you're not going to get any crumbs in the cake. Now, when we talked a little bit before about freezing cakes, the thing that you want to remember is if you're going to freeze a cake, that it must be wrapped very tightly. You can put it in your freezer, in a carton, then put a plastic bag over that so that you're sure that it's airtight. The other thing to remember is if you're freezing an iced cake, is that you always let it thaw before you start decorating on it. In other words, you're not going to take it right out of the freezer, put it into a hot room, and then start decorating. You're going to let it thaw while it's in the carton, and that way you don't get any moisture building up on the cake. When you're using the cake icer tip, you can lay another bead of icing around the top, or you can actually add the icing to the top with the spatula. I'm not going to really finish smoothing this out for you, but I just wanted you to see how quickly the icing goes on the cake with the cake icer tip. Next, we're going to be showing you how to construct the simplest type wedding cake there is by using just push-in dowels and pillars. The first method of construction that we're going to talk about is the push-in pillar type. And this is the easiest type of wedding cake to make because we have our layer on a separator plate, and then all we need to do is just actually push the pillars down through the cake, and it rests on the lower level. So you have no dowel rods to put in. But no matter what type of construction that you're going to use, there's a couple things to keep in mind, and that's how important it is to mark a cake. You not only are going to mark where you're going to put the decorations, but you also need to determine the front and the back of your cake first. You should look at your cake and decide what you want for the front, then mark the back either with a dot of icing, a toothpick, or a spatula, so you're always sure that you have the back of the cake. Then the other layers, you line up before you put them on the separator plates, see what you want for the front, and mark those in the back also. Then the next thing that you need to mark is where your pillars are going to go. So you should be sure that you're lining up square in the front, and you need to line them up two different directions. Not only do you need to line them up in the center, but you also need to line them up so that you're sure your pillars will be even. So you're going to just press it down lightly into the icing, and on the bottom of the separator plates, of course, where the pillars are going to go, there's little marks, so you're able to put those into your cake. Then the other thing to remember, no matter what kind of separator plate that you'll be using, is that when you put the columns in, you want to be sure and have all the fronts toward the front, so they're square. And these, again, they go right down through the cake. Then the next layer goes on. And again, this we've lined up before. So you want to put this in the pillars. sets down. We repeat the same process from the front, is that you want to take the smaller layer.
Not only are you going to have it in the center, but you also want to be sure that your 4 pillars are lined up all the way down. So you give this a couple more marks. I think I'll move that up just a little, and I think this shows how important it is to really get on the top of the cake and look down so that you can see where they are. The set that I'm using is a newest set we have, and this is a decorating set that takes 2 cake mixes. It comes with 3 pans, 2 separator plates, and you have 8 pillars. I think the nice part about this is when you're serving a small crowd for a wedding, you have just the right size cake. So we have the pillars down in again. You want to then those also set in. I think it's a good idea when you're doing a wedding cake, no matter what kind you're doing, is to get it all set up like this, so you're sure your pillars are right. Mark it, then you're going to take it apart and decorate it. Now with this particular cake, we're going to be having 4 even sprays. So you can just line up actually with your pillars, and you'll be marking just a little mark on each side in between your pillars, and that will be the center of your spray. Let's set this aside and show you the cake that we've started. And this is the bottom tier of the finished cake that you're going to see, and we have this marked with our spray. We've used Lily of the Valley and roses on this cake. Lily of the Valley is a flower that's used on a lot of different wedding cakes. I'm going to show you how to make this on the board, and then it's put on the spray. The spray is actually put on the cake. A lot of flowers we make ahead of time and they're put on the cake, but this has to be done on the cake. And the base of it is, this is a 67 leaf tip. It starts with just a long curved leaf. And remember, when you're making leaves, that you're going to be using thinned icing. And the center is with a number 3 tip, and the same thing holds true when you're making vines, is that you need a thinned icing, and this goes right down the center of the leaf and then just curves out a little bit for the stem to hold the first blossom. You can have 3 or 4 stems. Remember, when we've decorated before, anytime you're decorating, you're going to lay out your line or do your decorating, and when you want to stop, you're going to totally release the pressure and then touch down. The blossoms on the Lily of the Valley are made with an 81 tip. And these are made just kind of different than some of the other flowers. You're actually going to hold this up in the air, the curved in out, at just a little less than a 45-degree angle. And then you squeeze up in the air and let the little bud build up, and then you're going to touch down and put it on. Remember, you're going to hold it up in the air. You can just see it curve around, and then these are touched down on the cake. Up in the air, squeeze, let it curl around, and then touch down. Then the center of these has just a little tiny dot. Now I'm going ahead and use my number 3 tip that I was using for the vines. You might like to use a number 1 to make the little stamen in the center of the Lily of the Valley. And this makes a real pretty spray for lots of different wedding cakes. We've made ahead of time roses in royal icing. For wedding cakes, I think you're going to find making flowers ahead of time either with royal icing or with a Snow White buttercream, which the instructions that come with your wedding video has the recipe for the Snow White. If you happen not to have it, you might check some of the Wilton publications. Now, when you're using flowers that you've made ahead of time, the royal icing flowers that have already dried, to attach them to the cake, you need a little bit of extra icing. So you can just squeeze some of the icing on the same color of the cake and attach the flower. When we talked a bit before about freezing cakes, I think freezing cakes with the base icing on them, if you do that, you want to be sure and wait until now to put your flour spray on with the royal icing flours. You would never want to freeze a cake with royal icing flours on it. But put the spray, I think we'll add just a small yellow flour. Remember when you're making flour sprays that you're always going to have a center of interest, whether it's with two blossoms, a larger one, or the ones with the heavier color in the middle. Then of course, no matter when we put the flowers on, you're always going to add the leaves at the end, and just a few leaves in to fill it out. Now, most of the time when you're making cakes, you'd be adding a flour spray before you added a border. This one happens to be done just slightly different because the borders on the cake, and I think especially you'll tell when we look at our finished cake, these borders and sprays actually come down over the border of the cake, so you're going to have to add the flowers before you or after you put your border on. So a few extra leaves just to fill in. Then you would reassemble your cake. Remember, we're always going to take the cake apart before we take it to the reception site where we're going to be serving it. This 3-layer cake, I think, makes a perfect cake for a small at-home wedding, maybe for a shower, or even a birthday cake for your a very special occasion. I think one of the things that I like most about this is because it is fairly small, you're able to use a favorite cake plate to serve the cake on. We've finished the cakes with more floral sprays and then added an accent piece at the top with some extra flowers. And we have even pearl-handed servers that match the plate. Next, we're going to show how to make a very large wedding cake and show you how to do the dowel and pillar construction. The next type of cake construction that we're going to do is using pillars and dowel rods in the cake. And this is the type of construction that you're going to use often, maybe by itself or in combination with other types of construction methods. Before I really get into showing you how to put the dowel rods in the cake, I'd like to show you how to use the cake divider wheel. We talked a little before about you could measure by just lining up with the pillars, divide that way. But this cake happens to be divided in 12ths. And an easy way to do this is the cake divider wheel is divided in sections, and you have to center the cake in the middle. Then you're able to actually go out to the side. If you want to do 12ths, you follow the 12ths, and at each mark, you're going to mark the cake. This cake, the swags actually start about an inch down from the top. So we're going to go down and mark where the 12s are, and you can just mark them with toothpicks. So it's a real easy way to mark the cake. Now, if you were going to do a cake that actually had swags that start from the top and you want to mark those, we'll be dropping a string to mark ours. You can measure in between to see the length that you want your swag, then put the plastic piece into the marker, and this way you're able just to mark on the side of the cake to mark your swag this way. After you have the cake marked, and remember before we talked about, and it's important again to be sure you have the back of the cake and you're going to line these all up so you always have each layer the back towards you. On this cake we're going to be putting dowel rods in this layer, and the reason we need this is for support because we're going to have the plate and the pillars and other cakes on top of this. When you mark for dowel rods, we're starting with a 12-inch layer which will go atop our 16. And I'm using, for the 8-inch layer, I'm going to be using a 9-inch separator plate because you either want your separator plate 2 inches or 1 inch larger than the cake you're going to use. So since I'm using a 9-inch separator plate, I'm going to mark with an 8-inch cake circle. And inside this circle is where I'm going to put the dowel rods. And you can just put it on top of the cake, and remember this is all going to get covered up. So you want just an area that you're going to put the dowel rods in. When you're using the dowel rods, the thing to remember is that you want all the dowel rods exactly the same length. And we're going to put about 7 dowel rods in. And so you need to measure, go down through the icing. You should actually start, if you can see a lower point in your cake, that's where you should start measuring for your dowel rods. So you go in and be sure and mark where it comes out. And then these are where it comes out. You just clip these either with shears or you might want to use a small saw. Now I clipped my dowel rods ahead of time and measured. And the important thing to remember is you might want to mark the one you start with so you're sure they're all the same length. You want the dowel rods the same length, always. And you might take just a little fine piece of sandpaper and go over the ends of the dowel rods. Then these are placed inside the circle. And when you're using the pillars, you might kind of just keep in mind you have them close to where the pillars are going to go. Remember now, these are going to go down in, and these are all the same length. And of course, the reason you want them like this is because this is going to actually be the support for your cake. And then we have the 9-inch separator plate, and I've already put my pillars on, and again, we talked before about being sure that these are lined up. And a lot of times I'd like to add just a little bit of confectioner's sugar. You can use shredded coconut here on the top, and what this does is keeps the separator plate from sticking, because when you start serving, you're of course going to be dismantling your cake. So the separator plate then just goes atop this layer. Then we'll be adding another layer on top of this, and I just want to show you how these set on because I already have the other layer. I put dowel rods in our 16-inch layer, and then this goes atop this. Sometimes I think when you're doing a very large cake, I think when you get to the reception side, it certainly helps to have someone perhaps along with you that's going to help you line the cake up. Then the 8-inch layer goes on top of this one. And remember, we're always going to dismantle that cake before we start taking it to a reception site. I'll be showing you the finished cake and some of the extra little accent pieces that we're using on this cake in just a minute. But I want to show you some of the designs that we've used on this cake that I think you'll be using a lot for wedding cakes. And one that we talked about, the swags, instead of, if you're going to have it from the top of the cake, it's easy to mark with a marker, but when you're starting in the middle of a cake, you can mark where you want a swag to go just by dropping a string. And you do, remember we had our cakes divided in 12ths, and we're going to start when you use a string. This is, I think even when you're decorating a cake in royal ice, or in buttercream, you might want to use royal icing, just thinned with a little bit of corn syrup to make the string work. When you do the strings, you're going to actually let that icing just drop out of the tip and move across and hook it on. You don't really want to move your bag up and down like this. You get a much clearer, truer line if you just let it drop. Then, because we're using this as a guide, really for our swags, we're going to make the swags. This is with a number 16 or 17 star tip. And when you're making the swags, the thing you want to remember is you're going to start with a light pressure and start building up with a zigzag, and then as you get to the center, you want heavier pressure so it puffs up in the middle, and then come to the top and even off. Remember, you're going to start with light pressure, build up as you get to the center, and then as you come around, you're going to ease off on the end. And then you would be dropping, in this one we would be dropping actually 3 more strings on top of our swags. Another accent, we actually have on this cake 2 different types of bows. We have one made with a number 3 or a round tip, and then we have others on the centerpieces made with a 103 ribbon tip. And when you make bows, you're going to start with the ribbon tip with the wide end down on the surface. And what you do is just, it's really like making a figure 8 lying on its side. You'll be starting in the center and going up, around, down, up again, down to the center, and then just add little bows on the end. And this same process is repeated whether you're using a number 3 or a 104 or 103. The same process with the bows is that you're starting at the center, up and around, down, up, meet in the center, and then just make little ribbon streamers. The bottom border is just a variation really on a shell border, but I think it's a very pretty border. And when you're making a very large wedding cake, it helps to have a border that really fills out on the bottom. And this, we're starting with a number 32 tip, and it's we're starting with shells. And remember, when you're making shells, you're going to actually squeeze, let the icing fan out, and ease off. Squeeze, let it fan out, ease the pressure off. Let it fan out. Start the next shell on the tail of the one before. It's almost like a wiping motion on the board when you're making a shell. You have the shells. Then across each shell, this is a number 16 star tip, has just a little tiny zigzag border at an angle across the shell. Just this, we have a medium consistency icing. And remember, some of those things that you learned when you first started decorating is that as you're decorating, remember you're always squeezing with your right hand and guiding with your left hand. And as you go along, it's a good idea if you're constantly giving the top of the bag just a little twist, because it gives you something that you can start and stop the pressure on. Then of course, we're always talking about couplers, and we don't mention them that often, but I think one reason that when you're using one particular color in your bag that you're going to want to have couplers on some of your featherweight bags is when you're using the same color icing, it's very simple just to change your tip instead of having several bags of the same type of icing. Then the bottom, I'm going to turn this around, the bottom away from the cake around our shell border, we're going to add just a ruffle, and this is made with a 102 tip, starting with all ruffles with the wide end of the tip down, and this is just a little up and down motion to ruffle around the edge of the shells. In and out. And remember, when we talked a little bit before when we were making wedding cakes, is that you're always going to be taking the wedding cake apart before you get to the reception site. I think we want to go take a look at our completed cake, and I want to show you a few of the special features that we have on this cake. After you've gotten your wedding cake to the reception site, of course, you're going to reassemble it again. And after we've added the plates and pillars, we've added around the edge of each separator plate just a small shell border. And I think you'll want to do this with most plates. It gives a little finishing touch. Also, one of the last things you'll want to do is to add the ornament. And also around the ornament, you might want to do a small shell border. I'd like to show you just a few of the added touches that make this wedding cake really special. And that's the lace pieces and the figure-piped little lovebirds we have on. If you're not familiar with this type of work, you might want to review some of the Wilton wedding publications. But the lace piece is made with royal icing, and we have it on a wire. I think kind of an interesting thing, often you want to attach something to the center of the cake and want it to actually go down into the cake to give it support. To do this, all you need to do is heat an ice pick or a sharp pointed object, heat it, and then put it right down through the separator plate, and you'll have a small hole so you can put through the plate and into the cake to hold the pieces up. We use the 102 tip to make the bow on the lace pieces, and then we use that same technique with a number 3 tip to make the bows on the side of the cake. Now on this cake, the bottom 2 tiers will serve about 185 people because we always keep that top layer for the bride's first anniversary. When you're cutting a cake, remember, just like when we're transporting it, you're going to take it apart and cut each tier separately. When you're cutting these large tiers like this, you're going to cut circles around the layer and then cut through those to make the wedding cake servings. If you've lost the instruction sheet that came with your wedding video, you might want to look at some of the Wilton publications because we have charts in there that show you how to cut all types of layers of cakes. Now, in addition to this method of construction, we have 2 more that I want you to see, and next we're going to be looking at the stacked method of construction. To show you the stack method of construction, I'm using our new oval tier set. And these come in 4 different size cake pans, and also we have separator sets that if you want to separate these, we have those to go with it too, and it makes a beautiful wedding cake. The stack construction is slightly different than the other methods we've been talking about because this one is assembled before you decorate it and is kept assembled when you take it to where you're going to be serving it. When we start out, each separate layer, each one of these has dowel rods in it, so each layer is supported. Then the top layer is on a board, iced to the same size as the cake. Now you might want, when you're doing this method or this step of construction, you might want to put an extra board in between this board and the cake, about an inch smaller than this board. So when you get it at the reception site and you're going to be cutting it, it's easier to separate the tiers. Then to hold all 4 tiers together, in addition to the dowel rods in each layer, you'll need a long sharpened dowel rod. And this you can either sharpen on the pencil sharpener or just with a razor blade. And this goes straight down through the tiers to hold it together. Now you'll find when you get to the boards, it's a little bit harder. You might want to have just a small hammer to get it through that board, or you can use maybe the pruning shears. You want to be sure that this goes straight down through the cake because this is important. It'll hold it all together. Then at the end, now we're going to just push this down through. And on most cakes, you're going to find that this really doesn't make that much difference. We have a spray of flowers across the top of ours, and of course on most cakes you're going to have an ornament on the top. Now before we really get to finishing this cake, I want to show you a few of the things that we're going to use for decorations on it. We're using 3 different size ribbon tips for the borders. And one thing that we're doing are ribbon swags with little dots in between that looks very similar to a dotted Swiss. To make a ribbon swag, we're using a 104 tip with medium consistency icing. And like with most techniques when we're using the ribbon tip, we're starting with the wide end down. And to make the swag, we're just squeezing out into a nice even curve up to the top, stop the pressure, and pull away. In the swag, we're going down, back up, and stop the pressure and pull away. Now on the cake, within the ribbon swags, we have a series of small little dots. We're making this with a number 3 tip. Remember when you're making dots that you're going to squeeze and let the icing build up, then stop the pressure, and then just wipe the top off. You're going to squeeze, let it build up a little bit, stop the pressure, and just wipe it off so that you don't have a little top on the end. Squeeze, stop the pressure, and wipe it away. I think this is a type, when we talked about before, about personalizing a cake for a bride, that you might use corneli lace in this pattern, or even a copy of a lace that might be on a bridal gown. Another technique that we're going to use on this cake is the ruffled border in between the tiers, and this is made with a bead border, and then on top of that is a large ruffle border. And the bead border, if you remember, you make just like a shell. Again, I'm using a number 3 tip, and you're going to let the icing build up, ease the pressure off, and pull away. Build up, ease the pressure off, and start on the tail of the next one. And the reason we're putting the bead border down is with the large tip, the top, between the top 2 layers, we're actually using a number 124, and as we go down, we're going to use the 125 tip. And on top of this, to make the ruffle stand out a little, we're going to make a ruffle. And remember, like always, we're starting with the wide end closest to the surface, and we're just going to squeeze just with a little up and down motion. I'll turn this around. I think you'll be able to see it a little bit better, how this actually makes the ruffle stand up away from the border. I'm going to show you on the cake how the bead border fills in between the layers and with the large ruffle border. With a stacked method of construction, you're always going to start at the top and decorate down, because then if you make mistakes up here and they fall, they're not going to hurt something that you do down here, or you're not going to hit it with your arm. So remember, we're going to start at the top, and we have already put our ribbon swags on with the dots, and then between the layers we're going to put the bead border, and this will fill. Remember, we're going to squeeze and just let it build up, ease the pressure off, squeeze, ease the pressure off, squeeze a little bit more. This on the borders, this you fill in because we're always going to have the boards in between our iced cakes. And remember too, when you're decorating a cake, oh, that bead didn't turn out quite right. You know, I think sometimes when you're decorating, people think that if you make one little mistake, you have to start and stop all over again, but a toothpick comes in real handy, and it's easy just to wipe it off and start again. We'll finish around just a little bit more with the bead border, and then on top of the bead border, between the two layers, we're going to finish this off with the number 124. And remember, we have the bead border so that we'll have the ruffle stand out away from the cake a little bit. And as usual, we're starting, of course, with a tip with the white end down, and we have the tip number 124 up here and just on the surface, and then the ruffled border is made just with a series of small up and down motions, and this fills in between our two layers. Then after we have the ruffles in between the layers, and we'll go down 124 for the top two, and then we use a 125 for the bottom. Then we've had our flowers made ahead of time, and we'll add a flower spray to the other side. And then remember, now this cake we're going to take to the reception site that's already together. You know, we've talked a lot about how we're going to take the cakes to the site of the reception, but we haven't talked too much about when we're transporting them, what we can do to be sure that they're going to get there all right. One thing you might do is, if you have a station wagon, you might even like to line the back of it with foam rubber to keep the cakes from shifting around. Or if you're taking a cake in a smaller car, you can cut a piece of foam rubber about the size of the base of the tier and set that in the foam rubber so it doesn't shift around in your car. You might also want to add just maybe a light plastic sheet over the cake, or even if you're transporting in the trunk of your car, you might want to line the trunk of your car with a clean sheet so that you're sure the cake doesn't get too much sunlight on it or doesn't get dirty. On this cake, when we talked a little before about adding the ribbon swags, and we've added the tiny little dots in for the little dotted Swiss effect, and remember we talked about we might put corneli lace in this. We've added the arrangements of flowers, keeping in mind that we've had the accent piece in the middle and then brought the pieces down with the smaller flowers at the end. And also then the bead borders on it. This we put just a little bit of green around the bottom of the cake, and I think it makes a perfect cake maybe for a garden wedding. We have one last method of construction that I want to show you, and this actually is a combination of the stacked method and also the push-in pillar method that we used before. The last method of construction that I want to show you is a combination of two different ones we've used before. The bottom two layers are put together with the dowel construction. We have dowel rods supporting both the bottom two layers. We've used a square cake this time on the bottom with a round one. And then our top tier is added with the push-in leg construction that we talked about before. This one's just slightly different. This one is the crystal clear legs, but this will support our top tier. This cake we've decorated, it's really a real easy cake for you to do. And it's decorated with two different types of hearts and with sweet peas on it. The one heart that we have piped on the side of the cake, I think I've used a pattern press, and this is where these come in real handy. You can really put the pattern right into the cake. I think you can probably see on this cake where I've pressed the pattern in to get the shape of the heart. Then I want to show you how you actually make that heart. It's really a combination of a shell technique at the beginning and then just a pull-out line. You're going to start at the center of the heart and just make a little shell, then you come around, ease the pressure off, and wipe it off. Then the other way, the same thing. We're going to just make a little shell, come around, and ease the pressure off at the bottom. The other type of heart that we have piped right in the center of those hearts is piped with a number 3 tip. I want to show you one just at the edge so you can really see how it's done. This is made with medium consistency icing, and it's made very similar to the way we just made a little bead. You hold it up, bring it down to a little tip, and then right next to that you're going to make another little bead, and then you just blend those together. Remember, just the same way that we made the bead, let the icing build up, ease the pressure off, pull down, another little bead beside it, let it build up, and then just bring those in to blend them together. And these on the cake then are piped in the middle of the little heart. Remember the bead, bring it down just slightly, a bead next to it, and blend those two in together for the bead. The other method that's on this cake that is an easy border to do is made with a tip that has actually it's a combination of a star tip and a ribbon tip, but it's all in one, so you can make a border that goes together. And this time we're going to start, it has a little star tip in the end and the ribbon tip toward the other end. We're going to treat it like a ribbon tip in that the wide end, or which is the star tip, is down toward the surface and the narrow end is up. And this you can make just a ribbon swag border. So you get an effect of using 2 tips at the same time, but you get them all with just one motion of your tip. Remember, when we make the swag, we're going to start with light pressure, and then as we go down, just a tight zigzag motion, and up to the top, and when we want to stop, we're going to stop the pressure and pull away. The other decoration that we have on this cake that's easy to make are, we've made sweet peas. These we've made with royal icing and dried ahead of time to put on the cake. You can make sweet peas 2 different ways. One with the sweet pea, this is again, it's a 104 tip. We're starting with medium icing, and we're going to start with the tip wide end down on the surface, and we're going to just lay out, lay out just a flat fan shape, stop the pressure, and pull away. Then the sweet pea has 3 petals. The center one, where again the wide end is resting on the surface, and you just kind of let the icing shoot out across the top and makes the center curl petal, then one on the right side and one on the left side. Now you also can make these sweet peas, which is the one we're using actually on our cake, without the center back petal. And with these, you're just going to make the center petal, again the wide end down, let the icing fan out, make the center petal, then to the right and to the left. Now these type of sweet peas, you also can actually make these on a cake and they work great. But for this cake, we've let them dry ahead of time. And I want to show you how you actually, we talked a little before about putting icing flowers on a cake that we've made ahead of time. If you're putting individual flowers on, one at a time, you'll want to put just a little bit of icing on the back of the flower and stick them on. But many cakes are real effective with a large mound of flowers on them. And this, we need to start with actually a mound of icing to put them in so that the flowers are built up. I have a number 10 tip in my bag, and the same color of icing that you have, and I'm going to just put a mound of icing and kind of come down over the surface a little bit. And this will serve as a base for the flowers. Then the flowers we just put at random in the icing. Oops. If you, I think also, in addition to the royal icing flowers, again, that are made ahead of time and dried, you can make flowers out of buttercream. And if you look at the 2 flowers side by side, a royal icing flower and a buttercream flower, you can tell the difference because the buttercream flowers, when they're dried, have a kind of a translucent quality to them and look almost like porcelain. They're just a little bit more fragile than the royal icing flowers. So after we've built up a mound of icing, put the dried flowers in it, then we will add, like always when we're doing flowers, we'll add the leaves at the end. And then the way we've talked about a lot of the other cakes before, that before you would take this cake to where you're going to serve it, we wouldn't be putting the top tier in. When we get to the reception site, then we're going to be adding the top tier. Remember, when we get to
reception side is when we're going to add our top tier that was on the crystal clear pillars, and also add the ornament at the end. In this cake, remember, we had the two different types of heart on it, with the one that we piped with the shell technique and the star tip with this, and then we piped in the center the small heart with a number 3 tip that was made with 2 small little beads side by side. And then we have our swag border that we made with the combination tip. Now I want to take just a few minutes to show you some new products we have that's going to make making wedding cakes really even easier for you, and to give you just a few tips on mixing icing to match the bridal bouquet or the bridesmaids' dresses. You know, finally, there are 3 other cakes that I would like for you to see. Plus, I want to go over a little bit about how to mix colors to match a bridal dress or a ribbon. One of the newest stands that Wilton has is called a floating tier stand. And this is a metal stand that you could, the cakes are just resting on separator plates, and all you have to do is set them in the stand. This stand is perfect, of course, for the rolled fondant cakes, which are heavy and are a little bit harder to support with pillars. And also for those people, lots of people love cheesecake or angel food cake even for a wedding cake, and it's perfect for that because you can decorate each layer and just set it in. Then when you're doing a large cake, I think you might want to use a fountain as an accent piece, and this is a good example of a large cake that uses a fountain. And the fountains also have a ring around that you can put fresh flowers in for an accent piece. Also, we talked a little bit before about how you can personalize a cake for any particular type or size wedding. A lot of times when you need extra serving pieces, you might like to add satellite cakes to your main cake. And this is a good example of that type of cake in that it's hooked together with the stairways. Now, in addition to those cakes, I think there's a few products that I'd like to tell you about that we have now. One thing we've talked a little before about are the Wilton publications. And I think you might like to pick up some of these. They have a lot of good ideas in them. They have serving charts and recipes for icing. Then, of course, we talked a little bit about we make lots of products for you to make it easy to make weddings real special. And now we have ring pillows, we have servers, garters, even 2 sizes, or 2 different types really, of champagne glasses just to add to your weddings. Then just last a little bit, I think I get more questions from our students and our customers on how to mix icing to match something, to match maybe the bride's dress. I think when you're starting to decorate wedding cakes or any cakes, sometimes it's a good idea just to look and keep an example of what icing can do for you. These are done in royal icing, and I've just mixed a few colors together just to give you an example of different shades. This happens to be in Wilton the copper, a watermelon, pink, and lavender, and this are violet color, and this is the royal blue. Now we have sky blue, and that gives a little bit different shade, so it's a good idea just to keep in mind what the base colors are. Then if you want to match something special, perhaps like the ribbon on the bridal bouquet, you should look at it and decide what color you think that's closest to. Now I am starting with pink icing, and if you look and think the base color is pink, you're going to start with just a small amount of icing on a board. You don't want to start with a large bowl. Put this on the board, and then because it has a slight tone of the copper tone in this pink, I'm going to add just a little bit of copper icing to this. Now you could start with the pure colors, but sometimes I think it helps to mix the icing up ahead of time in the colors. And these can blend together. And the reason that I like to do this on a board rather than in a bowl is it's easier to see. You can even move the icing aside and see when you're getting the right tone. If you hold that, you can see you're getting very close to the ribbon tone, and that was mixing pink and copper together. And what you do when you finish that is, of course, you're going to save these, and you know then that when you start a large bowl of icing, that you're going to start with your base color, your pink color, and then with a big bowl, then all you have to do is start adding your second color to that. And then you'll come out with a color that matches something just exactly the way you want to. You know, I hope during this video that you've picked up lots of new and good ideas for making wedding cakes. At Wilton, you know, we know really how special it is. I think the wedding cake probably is one of the most important cakes that you might ever make.
So I think when you go back and view the video, maybe look at some of our publications, you're going to see ways that make it easy for you to make a special cake for that special bride, and maybe that's yourself or one of your friends.
Wilton products and decorating classes are available in your favorite department, specialty, and craft stores. For more information, contact Wilton Enterprises at 2240 West 75th Street, Woodridge, Illinois, 60517. Or for class information for your area, call our toll-free number